good evening. I'm going to use the microphone because this room isn't so acoustically appropriate for speaking, so it's easier. And when we'll do questions a little bit later, so just know that, especially if more people come, that it's better to use the microphone. So we'll probably still make you use it. I'm Rabbi Josh Winston, and it was there was an email that went around asking if anybody could host this presentation from Samaritas from Kayla in just a moment, and I was really happy to offer our space to learn more about taking care, foster care of refugee children. They're partly because the work of welcoming the migrant is something that's particularly close to my heart, and I was so happy to learn that Samaritas are able to move out of shelter situations and be in homes with families, and also was eager to invite Samaritas in, considering that they'll work with foster families, appropriate foster families, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of religion, regardless of gender, that they're committed to getting kids into homes that are appropriate for them. So knowing all of that, I was just excited to have this presentation happen, and it's an honor to invite Kayla to address us all and tell us more about what Samaritas does and the process for becoming a foster care family.
Thank you so much for welcoming us here. I'm actually not going to start us off. I'm going to start off with a video. This video features youth who have been through our programs, and I'm going to let you hear them speak first, and then I will take over from there.
My name is Tada. I'm from Burma, but I'm Korean. When I was growing up, I never saw my mom because she passed away when I was like 2, so I never saw her. I don't remember much.
My name is Marham Nikita Tekla Emanut. I am from Eritrea, which is found in the Horn of Africa.
I am Ali Tinai from Eritrea. I'm 18.
My name is Luam. I'm from Ethiopia, and I'm 18 years old, senior at Okumas High School.
My name is Diego. I'm from Guatemala. I came to the United States when I was 14, and I'm here to tell my story.
A lot of teenagers are moving out from our country, and that's totally influenced me.
I left my home country illegal because no one can get legal documents to leave the country. No one can get in and no one can live.
If you live in that country, you don't have future. Even you are attending the school, you don't have future. So we decided to go out from our country.
Because in Guatemala, I felt like I didn't have any future.
They have like a war, like a Burmese fight with Korean people.
When I came to the border, I started walking on the desert for half an hour. We were resting. And then when the police, they come and they take us, they picked us up in the desert, and they took us to a place, it's like a jail. They always stay there, and then it's where I got processed.
When you cross that border, if they can kill you.
They asked us why we were in the desert, and why we came in the United States. And it's when I told them that I need to come in the United States because in Guatemala we don't have any money. We need clothes, shelter, food, and the United States.
Like the soldiers, and like, but we are not. By the other side, you feel happy because he's crossed the border, and by the other side, you think what he left behind about your parent, about your everything, you know. You feel like you are separate from your parents, your friends for your lifetime, you know.
Most people, like, at first they don't understand what you've been through, so they just basically say, oh, he's here, he's a happy person, living with them, laughing, eating, that kind of stuff, but they won't know, like inside of you, what you care, what kind of struggles you have been, so they will be not knowing them because first of all, you don't speak English, second of all, you won't be like able to be open with them and to communicate with the language.
When they took us to the refugee camp, it's very horrible to live in that camp. There isn't enough food, and there's nothing that you can do. There's no work, there is no school. You feel like featureless. One day, the UNICEF members came to the camp to visit, like, how the people live. They interviewed me, and at that time I was start the process to USA. So my process was so successful. I can say I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to come here.
The first thing that scared me was like from Chicago airport to Lansing, the small planes. That was a scary thing in the United States. I was a little bit nervous and I couldn't speak English.
I first came here, I just know only how to say yes and no, and me no English.
I arrived in the winter and it was snow. Like it was difficult to be adapted in that weather because we don't have snow in Africa.
When I was in Arizona, it was hot there, so when I got here, it was really cold. Well, 3 years later, I got a little bit used to it.
Pizza or cheese or hamburger or fries and stuff, I don't like those stuff, any of it. Now, I eat it like almost every day. I like it. Like, yeah, I eat it every day to school.
My first day at school was just after 2 days from my arrival. I arrived on Friday, and on Monday I went to school.
At first I felt rejected by people because people were laughing and stuff, and I don't know what they was laughing about. The first 2 days I cried, but now I'm strong enough to.
It's like new and stuff, like you might be scared or feel a strain in a new country, but just don't, because yeah, we all human and we all help each other.
And living with other people, like, it means like accepting different behaviors.
Don't be stuck in your own language, food, anything. You have to see outside of your box.
Because there's still a lot of kids out there that they need homes.
There's a lot of people. They are kind of featureless in the camps. Try to help them to see the world and what it looks like. Maybe they can change the world.
I'm trying my best, looking forward to graduate high school and go to college.
I want to learn about agriculture, and I want to own a farm and raise animals, grow vegetables.
I never imagined to come here or even go to school. Or even live in a house like this. I'm really happy that
I get to be in this program. I have two plans. I mean, graduate high school, go to college, be smart, and finish college, graduating from dental hygiene, and make change around the world.
There's a lot of people. Yeah, so.
Stop it right there. Thank you for bearing with the skipping in that. All of those kids, they're teenagers. They're young adults now. All of those young adults are now, by the way, in that video, are in college or universities, except for one who is a rising business owner in our community, which is very humiliating because we were at the point where we were providing him services and he had a nicer car than all of us who worked in social work. So they truly are amazing. So once again, my name is Kayla, and I work for Samaritas. Now just briefly, some of you might be familiar with Samaritas for a number of different reasons. We don't just do refugee foster care. With Samaritas, it is a nonprofit that provides services all over the state, probably most notably senior living, refugee resettlement, foster care, services to people with disabilities, among many other things. Now, we are a smaller program within Samaritas based out of Lansing, though we do work around the state, and we do refugee foster care. And before I go into that, I would like to ask you guys just to take a minute and close your eyes, if you dare to. Close your eyes and just think about any children you might have or any children that are close to you in your life. And I'm going to ask you, do you know where they are right now? And when I say that, what I mean is, do you know what country they're in? Their general whereabouts to that extent. Do you know, are they going to school right now? Do they have a job? Are they working? Do they have enough food and enough water to survive? If they are in trouble, is there someone that they can go to for help? Is there even a number that they can call for help? All right, so you can open your eyes now. These are all things that we expect a child, a youth, to have access to. Food and water is life. To have the opportunity to go to school, to get a job, to pursue a bright future, and to have safety. Yeah, unfortunately, as you're going to see, there are tens of thousands of kids around the world right now living in refugee camps far away from their parents who may not know their whereabouts, and they have no one to take care of them. So just some statistics. So first of all, what is a refugee actually? Let's clear this up. A refugee, as you can see, is someone who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. They have a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. Most likely, they cannot return home or are afraid to do so. So the difference between a refugee and an immigrant, a refugee was forced to leave their country. They did not have the choice. That is who we work with. People who usually did not want to leave their country. That was their home, and they were forced to due to situations beyond their control. In the world right now, there are about 68 million people who are considered dislocated. This isn't on the slide. You'll get confused if you look at the slide. 25.4 million are considered refugees. At least that was the count in May. And of that number, over half are children. And then within those children, there's another number that is really difficult to figure out. And it seems like every time I try and look it up, I get a different source and a different number. But I've seen that number estimated as high as 98,000 a couple years ago, and those are unaccompanied refugee minors, or youth from around the world who have lost or been separated from their families while fleeing their home countries. These kids end up in refugee camps entirely alone. And then they face the situation of being unable to be resettled into a safe community because they have no one to care for them. So if they were a child resettled and entered the refugee camp with a family, they could be resettled in a safe community along with that family. If they were an adult, they could be resettled as an adult, able to care for themselves. But if they are less than 18 years old, then they're still considered a child. They're too young to care for themselves, especially in a new culture, facing a new language. And so these youth find themselves stranded without the opportunity to go to the safe community. And so they're stuck in these refugee camps in these dire situations. And so what can be done for them? Now this is where we come in. We are one of about 24 programs in the United States that focus on serving these unaccompanied refugee minors. And we go out into the community and do just what I'm doing right now. We tell people about this, spread the word, and we connect with those who say, you know what? I have a room in my house. Maybe it's even like an office that I really don't need as an office anymore. Or I still have space in my heart. I want to welcome in one of these youth, and then we will begin to work with that family. We will get them licensed as a foster home, and I'll go more into the information regarding that. And then once that family is licensed as a foster home, a youth who is waiting in a refugee camp or a shelter has the opportunity to come and be resettled into a safe community. But the unique situation where they are in fact being resettled directly into a family already living here who can welcome them in as a family and help them make the adjustment and pursue a future here while we're providing services as well. So where are the youth coming from? Basically, how I break this down is our youth are coming from two directions. We have youth coming from overseas, and we have youth coming across the border. And all of the countries that are colored are the countries of origin of youth who are currently in our program. So these might not show the latest trends where most of the youth are in need, but it shows where the youth have been in need and where basically the demographics that make up our refugee foster care population. So a lot of our youth come from Africa. Currently, almost all the youth come from Eritrea. I will say that the numbers of youth who are referred from overseas has significantly dropped within the last couple of years. The youth, even unaccompanied refugee minors, are facing the same difficulty in getting approval to come to the U.S. as the adults are. So as we've seen those numbers of refugees drop, we see the numbers of unaccompanied refugee minors referred to the U.S. drop as well. When I first started working here 3 years ago, all of those countries that are colored were places that we were receiving referrals from. And now we are receiving referrals almost solely from the country of Eritrea, which, if you don't know, is right on the east coast of Africa, and it is right next to Ethiopia and Somalia. And Eritrea has been compared to North Korea in the level of its human rights abuses. A lot of the people there are basically treated as though they are enslaved. The government feels free to force anyone, and it's basically everyone who is a guy into military service, where then they're used for hard labor. And so we have a lot of people fleeing that oppressive government. And just to illustrate the number of situations that we may have youth that would result in a youth separated from their families. We had a boy in Eritrea, and he was very young at the time. I can't remember his age, but it was younger than 10. And he lived on the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia, which is the nation that many people are fleeing to. And he would see people crossing the border, and he didn't realize where the border was. He didn't really realize what was going on at all. But one day he saw these people crossing, and he said, "Oh, I wonder what they're going to go check out." And so he followed them like a curious young boy would. And this young boy successfully fled his oppressive country. He made it safely across the border. He made it safely into Ethiopia. He did a feat that many people wish they could do and have not undertaken or did not succeed in doing. And he did it accidentally. Now the problem was he couldn't return home, because what he had just done was considered a major crime. And so to come home, he would then jeopardize his safety to cross that border again. So he found himself entirely alone in a refugee camp, unable to go back home to his family when we heard about him. We also have youth coming from Asia, predominantly actually Afghanistan and Burma right now, or most recently it has been solely referrals from Myanmar, Burma. We have been working with Rohingya people, the minority group that has been persecuted for their Muslim faith. And we have had youth who have been referred to us, and those youth often do not know where their families are, or they do know where their families are and they are unable to be reunited with them. Because let's say that you are a father and you have a child and you recognize the danger that might be coming, and so you tell them that they need to flee. And so you get them with a group of people who are fleeing, and this child flees and now ends up in a refugee camp in one country. And then the day actually comes when your village is attacked, and now you flee for your life, and you end up in a refugee camp in another country. And you may find each other, you may not find each other, but sometimes even if you do find each other, you're now not able to cross those borders to get to each other. Now you have a new set of borders to face. So we have a lot of youth unaccompanied from Burma right now. And so the youth from overseas, what happens is that they will arrive in a refugee camp. When they're in the refugee camp, a worker from the UNHCR is going to begin trying to figure out what can be done for them. Do they have the opportunity to go back and be resettled, go back home? Do they have the opportunity? Is there a family member that they can find? They will look to see if they have the opportunity to be resettled in the country where they are currently. Is that a country that's going to offer them a future? And if they determine that none of these are options, this child cannot stay where they are because they do not have access to the education to what they need to survive, then they will begin to look at the possibility of resettlement in a third country. And if that's the United States, then that youth is going to go through the exact same vetting process as an adult. And if you did read, I believe it was one of the previous slides, it said that the vetting process is so intense that we know more about refugees than we do even about registered sex offenders. And they will go through that same process, which will often take years. And then if they are approved for resettlement, then their information will go to Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, which oversees refugee foster care programs such as ours. And then LIRS, if they know that we have homes available, will send that information to us and say, here is the information on a youth who needs a home. Is there anyone in your program who can take them in? And if we do have a home and that home has space, maybe they were just licensed and they haven't had a placement yet, we will then pass on that information to the family. And if the family says, yes, we would love to welcome this youth in, at that point they're going to prepare that youth to go to the United States. They will get on an airplane and they will meet their foster family actually here in the airport. And so they will immediately go from the refugee camp to the home of a local family. The other direction that we have youth coming from is from Central America, predominantly Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, collectively known as the Northern Triangle, which many of you probably know is in fact a very, very dangerous place with some of the highest homicide rates in the world. And when we have the youth who are fleeing these situations, the one thing to keep in mind is as they are fleeing gang activity and they are fleeing danger, they are not young people who've gotten themselves in trouble and now need to get away. These are the kids who are staying out of trouble. Because if a gang is trying to recruit you, part of the gang activity is to kill someone. I mean, it's more than just taking bribes and stealing. A lot of times you have these very, very young teens, even boys, expected to kill someone as an initiation into the gang. So when you have teens who are fleeing that, if the gang is starting to threaten them and they need to get out because they're not going to be a part of that, they're fleeing not only to save their lives, but also to save their humanity. So we have a lot of youth who are fleeing that situation. A lot of youth from Central America are also victims of trafficking. And sometimes they will be rescued in the U.S. Sometimes they'll be apprehended. And then if they realize they're a victim of trafficking, they might refer them to us because they automatically are eligible for a visa here. It's now unsafe for them to go home. And so what happens with these youth is that they will cross the border, and these youth are those who are crossing the border undocumented. And once they cross that border, they will often turn themselves in and try and claim asylum. But sometimes they are apprehended crossing. And then they're under the care of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. And they are then going to go through, they're going to stand in a court. The government is required to basically take them through a series of court cases to trials to try and claim that this youth has broken the law by coming here. And then the youth has the opportunity to say why they are fleeing for their life. If they have a lawyer, their chances are much better than if they don't have a lawyer. I don't know if any of you have looked up those statistics, but it's shameful. So if one of the youth can show that, yes, I do actually have a reason to fear for my life, I fled from my country for good reason, I cannot go back, and the U.S. government determines that, yes, you are actually eligible for a visa, we can't send you back home for your safety. They are now here with the permission of the U.S. government, and they will be placed in a shelter where they will stay indefinitely until a foster home can be found for them. And once again, their information is going to be sent to Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, who will then reach out and contact us, share the information and say, do you have a home that would be a good fit for this youth? And then we will contact any foster home that has a space, and if they say yes, then that youth is going to get on an airplane and come to Michigan and be placed directly into the home of that foster family. And so without foster homes, this is a question we're asked a lot, what happens otherwise? Without foster homes, most of the time we don't know. Refugee camps, they may be there indefinitely. We don't know what happens to them. If they are placed in a shelter, we know a little more, and it's pretty bleak. If they are in a shelter in the U.S. and a foster home is not found for them at the age of 18, they are basically kicked out on the street. They might be relocated to more of a detention center, more of an adult prison situation. And if they do not find a foster family, and then they are not able to receive services that programs such as ours could provide to them, those opportunities to go to high school, those opportunities to, get your first job, those opportunities to connect with a family, to be on the soccer team. And the government's going to be checking in on them and seeing, how are you doing? And if they're like, oh, I'm living on the street because you kicked me out of the detention center, they're going to be like, oh, that's really going to harm their ability to show that they should stay here permanently. And so for those youth who end up in that situation, it is a very bleak picture. So some of the statistics about the youth that we serve. 85% of our youth are 17 to 20 years old, and that is those who are in the program. We work with youth up to the age of 21. 75% of the youth are boys, are male. And the reason is that the journey that they are undertaking is very, very dangerous. A lot of girls don't make it. The threat of trafficking is very, very real. And more than 75% of the youth come to our program who are 16 or 17 years of age. We do sometimes see youth as young as 14 or 13, but rarely younger than that. And this is kind of shocking to people, because when you go online and you read newspapers and you turn on the TV and people talk about unaccompanied refugee minors, they find a cute little 6-year-old. And this is an unaccompanied refugee minor, which is a little misleading and does a disservice to those who really need help. There are young kids who are coming across the border, but they come across the border often to reunite with a family who is already here. And so some programs look for short-term foster homes for them. We might be opening such a program soon, but they will eventually go home to their biological family. So they are not truly unaccompanied. The youth that we work with are those who come here and they have nobody. And the journey that they have undertaken is not something that you can do alone at the age of 5. If we see younger kids, they normally have an older sibling who is able to carry them through. And so for those youth entering the refugee camp, some of them, I've read the reports, enter the refugee camp as young as 11, 12, 13, 10, and even that young boy. But then once they're in the refugee camp, they wait and wait while they determine what can be done, what's the best option for them, while they take them through the vetting process. So then by the time they're finally referred to our program, by the time a foster home is found, they are normally older. So our whole program is really geared towards seeing these youth as budding adults with a bright future ahead of them that is so close. And we want to provide all the services that we can to get them to that point where they can thrive, where they can graduate from high school, where they can go on to college and universities, as the youth in the video that you saw did, where they have the opportunity to grow up in a safe community and pursue everything that the United States has to offer, which quite frankly is more than many of them could ever dream. And it is very cool. Actually, I remember listening to a foster parent who came to present at such an event talk about one of her boys, and the moment when she asked him, so what do you want to be? Like, you're in high school, you need to start thinking of a career, what do you want to do? And he just didn't understand. What do you mean? Well, what would you like to do? What would I like to do? Like, he had never before learned to dream, learned that his future could be his. And so she talked about how cool it was walking him through these steps of self-discovery as he could learn that he had the right, the option to choose something that would make him happy, something that would be fulfilling to him, and pursue that as a career. That was a side anecdote. So once again, our youth are older. If the youth do manage to enter a refugee camp, and if they are resettled in as an adult, one interesting thing is that refugee resettlement agencies do not have nearly as long to work with them as we do. So even if they are resettled, it is amazing for youth at that age to be resettled into a foster care program, because they will get an infinitely greater almost number of resources, and there is significant help for refugees who are being resettled as well. But if we have a youth who enters the program around the age of 13 or 14, we can provide nonstop case management services, therapy services to them to the age of 21, and then obviously they have that connection to the foster parents as well. So once the youth come into the country, their journey isn't done. Actually, their journey is just beginning. And so unaccompanied refugee minors in our community have a lot against them, a lot going for them. But when they come here, they have to learn the new language. They come here knowing no English. As Tada shared in the video, she knew, me no English. And kids come in knowing the most random words like Nike. And that doesn't help them very much. And so there's a steep learning curve as they have to learn this entire new language. They have to learn to navigate a new culture. And I don't know if any of you have traveled or spent a significant amount of time in another country, but it is amazing how many little things you have to learn. That's okay, that's not okay. And it's exhausting. And almost anyone I've spoken to who's lived in another country, even for reasons that does not have a traumatic background, says, yes, you will experience depression, even just moving to another country. They are attending high school. Our youth are enrolled in high school immediately when they enter the program. They are too old to attend anything younger than high school, though many of them are not at the high school level yet. We have had youth come in who have been shepherds from a young age. I've seen reports on youth who have been selling shoes on the street from a very young age. And even those who were able to have a consistent education, that education was disrupted in the crisis, whatever crisis precipitated their flight from their home country. So they will attend high school, and that's, again, it's a school that they're behind in a language they are still learning, a steep learning curve. And we will work to find them tutors to work with them and help them. Schools can provide ESL services to them, but it's the reality that a lot of our youth are not going to graduate high school within 4 years. A number of them will graduate around 18, 19 or older, or eventually find alternative ways to get their education like a GED, or in Lansing we have a really cool program that needs to be replicated everywhere. If any of you have the resources to do so, they actually partner with a school in Florida, and they provide the Florida high school curriculum in the basement of a church, and it's specifically for refugees who are too old to attend normal high school. And when they graduate, they get a high school diploma, not a GED. It is a high school diploma. It's really, really cool. And so a lot of our youth benefit from that program. A lot of youth want to find jobs. And the reality is, a lot of them who are still in contact with their families are asking them to send money back home. A lot of them are paying off smugglers if they were smuggled into the country. And so they have all of this on their shoulders, and families back home that don't understand that the United States is not the golden dream that they've been promised, that your kids, once they come here, even though they fled here for safety, once they begin living here, that they're not automatically going to have a ton of money to send home to you. And so a lot of the kids are under a lot of pressure from their parents on top of all these other things they're experiencing, and on top of the grief of having to leave home. And so they have a lot on their shoulders. They're going to immigration court and working towards getting a green card. And that is in addition to the grief, the loss, the trauma of their experiences. And some of our kids have seen horrific things that I don't even want to repeat. But they have seen things that are unimaginable to us in this life. And all of this is happening while they are a teenager. And I don't know if any of you know teenagers or were once a teenager, but it's a difficult enough time already. And the amazing thing to me is how amazing these teens are. When I think about all of this and I have them in my car and I'm talking to them just about everything going on in their life, and they're trying to catch up in school, they're meeting a tutor, they're going to a job, they're on the soccer team, because they're all on the soccer team. And I always say this, there are schools, our youth make up the soccer team. And sometimes I go to communities and people in the audience will nod, yup, like they just know. And they're doing, and I just like, how do you do that? How do you sit in my car and listen to your Spanish music and smile and laugh and have fun? How do you even get out of bed? You have so much more on your shoulders than I could ever dream as the lazy teenager I was. And on top of that, you're doing more extracurricular activities than I ever was. Where is this coming from? But the youth that we work with do not take anything for granted. They understand what they've been given, and they want to pursue a life here. They want to pursue a bright future here. They want to get an education. And they are not alone. So here's the happy side to all of this. They have foster families. And the foster families, I don't think I talk about enough, because I don't think I can talk about them enough. Our foster families are the foundation of our program. And they are the ones who welcome them in, who are there for them day and night. We're there for them as our jobs, and we love our jobs, and we're passionate about our jobs, but our foster families have given them a family, have given them their heart and their soul. And also, we can only welcome in as many youth into the program as we have foster families. So not only do they provide the greatest service, but they also really determine how many youth can be served. We have host families for youth who are transitioning out of foster care. Host families that will rent to, these are often families that have tried to become foster homes, and for some reason their home didn't meet the licensing requirements. Some of them are pretty silly. I'll go over them if we have time. And so they will rent a room to a youth. They're not a foster home, but a youth who is transitioning out of foster care will go and live with them. And then that's a place where that youth can begin to learn independent living skills like buying groceries, caring for a home, paying rent. And this is a safe place. A lot of families are like, I don't want to charge them rent. That seems terrible. I just want to welcome them in. But it is very important, because it's a great opportunity for them to learn, and it's a safe place where if they do not pay their rent on time, they're not going to get kicked out on the street. Someone who is very close to them, who they spend a lot of time with, is going to sit down and say, okay, let's take a look at your budget. What did you do this month? Where did your money go? Maybe those shoes weren't necessary. You are 19 after all. Let's look at what you can do differently. 19 as in they keep buying, things we don't need. Mentors and tutors. Our volunteers, mentors will spend a few days with them, a few hours with them, at least a few days, a few hours with them at least a month. Often they meet every week just to hang out, help them adjust to this culture. Our mentors will take these grocery shopping, volunteering, go do fun things. We have tutors, once again, who will work with the youth after school to help them get caught up. Case managers. So we, in our program, have a low turnover rate for case managers. There are case managers there who have been working for years with the same youth. At that point, they know that youth like they are their child. Therapists who are available for the youth, and all of the staff will go to the foster parents' home. We are right there where the youth is to provide care to them. Independent living coaches to teach them the independent living skills that they need, such as how to eat healthy, what even is healthy food, all of those things. We have people who do cultural orientations with them to teach them things as in, who do you call when you're in trouble, when to call an ambulance. And I sat in on one of those, and one of the most interesting things I learned is you can trust the police in the United States. And some people are like, whoa, but compared to where these countries these kids come from, they needed to be told, if you are in trouble and there is a policeman across the street, you can go to them. Because in so many of these countries, they could not trust the authorities. And so they had to be told and taught that here you can. And then the community. Because our community can be a voice of welcome and can welcome these youth in. There are many ways to get involved, many ways to serve. And so the community all around can be that group that welcomes them in with open arms and says, we are happy that you are here, and we want to welcome you, spend time with you, support you, cheer when we see you on the soccer team. And am I hitting the wrong one? There we go. So we went over that, but here are some statistics on our program. This in the last year, we served a total of 155 youth. We saw 20 youth graduate from high school this year. Every last one of those youth who graduated from high school is now attending college, a university, or a trade school. Every last one of them. And we also had a mentor become a foster parent because they were mentoring a youth who was in one of our group homes. We have 2 group homes for older youth. And they fell in love and called us up and said, we want to foster this youth, and this youth wants to leave the group home and come into our foster home. And they were the most gung-ho foster, like, they broke our record for how fast a home was licensed. It's a difficult process. And they were like, begging our licensing team, please, please, move faster, move faster. So our foster homes, they are called long-term foster homes because the youth cannot be reunited with the families. So they will live with the foster home for a number of years. So this is what differentiates us from domestic traditional foster care as we know it. Traditional foster care looks for a short-term placement where a youth can stay until they can go back to their biological family or to an adoptive family permanently. Our youth are not up for adoption, and they can't be reunited. And so the foster families who take them in will be their foster family until that youth is ready to move out on their own, which is often a number of years, which does make them their unofficial family. And so a lot of people ask me the question, do I need to speak another language? I don't know another language. 66.6% of our families do not speak another language. They only speak English. This is actually very beneficial for our youth. We have had youth placed in homes that only speak their native language and asked to be moved to a home that speaks English because that will further their opportunities here. Families do not need to own their own home, be married, have a minimum income, or have previously raised children to be successful foster parents. And so the foster homes will go through the same identical licensing process as domestic homes, and what this means is that they'll be licensed through the state. So if you already have a foster care license and you think, I'd like to do refugee foster care either now or in the future, you can transfer your license over to our office. Or likewise, if you start off as refugee foster care and you decide to do domestic foster care, you can transfer your license back. And some families have actually fostered both simultaneously. So if you are interested how to become a foster home, step 1 is to attend an orientation. That's where we're going to go over the licensing process in detail as well as the foster home requirements. And this is an opportunity for you to really assess if this is going to be a good fit for you and your family. They're really boring. I'm sorry in advance. But we're going over all of the rules, and we're going to be opening rule books and reading through them. But we have to. If you are interested, this is a necessary step, and we try and make it as interesting as possible. We really do. If you are interested, we are having another one in Ann Arbor, actually, this coming Monday. And I'll be teaching that orientation. If you would like to attend, just shoot an email to me, or just come tell me now after this presentation. They will attend trainings. We're going to make sure they're a safe family with background checks, and I just want to discuss right now a common barrier to getting licensed. If anyone is interested, so that basically we don't waste your time, exits. This is such a silly thing to throw in a presentation, but I feel like I have to. If a family wants to be a foster home, and in their basement is used recreationally, like it is a nice, man cave or Michigan cave, and it has a pool table or a home office or a exercise facility, there will need to be a way to exit that basement directly outside. So a family would need a window that someone would be able to crawl through or a door going directly outside. If not, a family can move everything from the basement upstairs and just rearrange, or they can install a window, and some families have opened a GoFundMe to raise the money to install a window, and then that has given them the opportunity to also build a support system around them for this program. So if a family becomes a foster home, once again, you'll receive a phone call sharing the information about the youth. There will be no definite date of arrival. Once they'll need to figure out the flight and all of that. And so this is another way that our program is unique, because you will know the youth is coming far in advance of the time that they come. And you'll have that opportunity to study their culture and prepare meals, to prepare, maybe learn a few words, and prepare to make them as welcome as you can. We are looking forward to possible new programs. I just want to throw this out because we have, a while ago, were potentially asked to open a short-term program for youth who are in need of transitional homes until they're reunited with their families. We still don't know if that's going to happen, but our director feels optimistic enough that it will, that she asked me to include it in this presentation. So just know we might be opening new programs. Keep up with us on Facebook, because that's where I will post it the moment that we know. So if that's happening, we're very excited about that, because that is a whole new area of service and youth who are in need. So ways to get involved, other ways to get involved. We need host parents, we need volunteers, we need mentors if you can't foster. We look for vacant homes that we can rent for youth who are transitioning out of foster care. We will staff a home, an independent living home, that can host a number of youth. And then help them as they learn independent living skills as well. So it's kind of like a host home, but it's through our program. And if you own a business, have our information available. Maybe there's a way we can partner with you to get the word out, because what we really need is more people knowing about this program so we can welcome in more youth. We look for, all right, I just need to tell you guys, any agency that works with foster homes has a lot of wishes, but one of them is that they can spoil their foster homes like crazy, because it is impossible for us to show our gratitude to the foster families for what they do. And so I see online just foster care agencies asking, can someone donate, gifts for our foster families, gift cards for our foster families, things that we can show support to our foster families. And so to support, the foster families are often overlooked, but to support the foster families is such a big need. And then gift cards can also be used to purchase independent living supplies for youth who are transitioning out of foster care. So I have one more slide, and then I'm going to introduce one of our foster parents who's here to share. But I just want to end with this quote, because I love this quote, and I think this really summarizes our program. So this quote was by one of the youth who came into Samaritas, and he was remembering that moment that he got off that plane in the airport. And he said, I didn't know anybody here, but when I saw my mom, she was holding a sign that was saying, "Welcome, Abdullah, welcome to the United States," in my own language. It surprised me, and I felt like I wasn't going to be alone anymore. And there are two things I love about this, and one of them is how easily he was given hope after everything that he had been through, after everything that he had experienced. He was now entering a new country where he knew nobody, and someone welcomed him with a sign in his own language. But the fact that someone welcomed him with a sign, he said, I knew I wasn't going to be alone anymore. But my favorite part of the quote is the part when he says, I saw my mom. Because when he met this woman, he had no idea who she was. But when he remembered this moment a few years later, he didn't hesitate to say it just like that. At that point, she had become his mom. And so I think that that really summarizes what our program is about. And so with that, I would like to welcome and introduce Mariam Ashraf to the front. And you get a microphone.
This is a little overwhelming, but I can use it if we need it. Do I need it? It's better. It's better? Okay, I'll use it. Hi, everyone. I just came in, so I'm not exactly sure what has been discussed already, but I'll start by introducing myself, and I guess what I'll do is just tell you all a little bit about my process in becoming a foster parent. And I know that you have discussed a little bit about that already, so I'll try to give you some more of the personal details. So My family and I have lived in Michigan for about 4 years. Before that, we were living in Charlottesville, Virginia, and then relocated here to be a part of the University of Michigan community. I remember, I think it must have been 2015 when the refugee crisis from the Middle East started gaining a lot of public media attention. And specifically, there was this one image of a 2.5-year-old Kurdish boy face down, with waves of the Mediterranean Sea, just lapping up against him. And that image was burned into my soul. And I said, what kind of a world do we live in that lets children escaping war die on the shores of the sea? And how can I, as a wealthy, privileged American who's been given everything I've ever wanted, who's never had a day of hunger in my life, whose biological children are growing up in the lap of luxury with a silver spoon in their mouths, how can I let children die in this world when my house is big enough to welcome more people into it? And then I said, what can I do? I happened to walk into the mosque, the one in Ann Arbor up on Plymouth Road, a couple days after that, and saw on a bulletin board a flyer for Muslim Family Services that said, become a foster parent. And I picked up that flyer and I took it home and I told my husband, we have to do this. And so I went to the orientation and I started the paperwork. I was living in a 2-bedroom rental at the time. And I had one biological child who's 3 years old. And the way that the spacing worked out is I just didn't have the bedroom dimensions to make it work, because children have specific requirements for bedroom space that they need. And initially I was mumbling and grumbling about it, but I understand the reasons for these requirements, because you don't want somebody taking in as many foster kids as they can. And you know that negative stereotype that foster parents have gotten at some point in time in the past of hoarding children and accepting checks and then putting them in the basement. So I respect and appreciate the reasons that all of these rules exist. But at that point in time, we were living in a rental. We didn't have the space to become licensed foster parents, but I had already gone through the orientation process and I was kind of in the system, and I had met people who had wanted to become foster parents at that orientation, and we were all very bright-eyed and excited about it, and we exchanged information with one another and added each other on Facebook and whatnot. A little while after that, fast forward, I don't know how long, to be honest, I don't remember. One of the women who I had attended orientation with had become a foster parent through Samaritas and was waiting to welcome her foster child, who had an older brother who had just aged out. He had turned 19 before he had arrived in America, and so he had aged out of the foster system, and they were looking for a host home for him. So she posted it up on the internet. I'm looking for a host home, we're looking for a place for this, for my foster child's sibling to live so that they can be close to each other. And I jumped at the opportunity, because to be a host parent, you don't need those same, rigid, stringent requirements as you do to be a foster parent. So I said, absolutely, I'll do it. And at that point in time, I was 4 months pregnant with our second child. I had a 4-year-old, and we were still living in a rental, and my husband, and they were like, great, he's getting here in 2 weeks. And it all happened very, very quickly. And my husband was like, are you out of your mind? This is an 18-year-old man or a 19-year-old man. We have no idea who he is. We have no idea who he comes from. We don't speak. And one of the reasons I had started this process to become a foster parent is because I speak Arabic. I'm not Arab. I'm Indian by, I guess, ethnic origin. My family is Indian. I speak Hindi and Urdu, but I studied Arabic in school. So I said, well, if I'm thinking about becoming a refugee foster parent to kids from the Middle East, that language sub-skill might be handy. Afghans don't speak Arabic, and my foster kids were Afghan. They speak Dari. I didn't even know what Dari was. I had to Wikipedia it. It is a dialect of Persian. And I was like, we don't speak his language. We know nothing about him. And at that point in time, you just got to take a pause and say, you got to take a chance on something in life. It doesn't mean be stupid. It doesn't mean, yes, you welcome a stranger into your home and you like leave all your valuables out in the open and all of those things, but you know, take the proper precautions and take a step forward. And so we took that step forward. And Kayla has heard me do these talks before. So I have to try to not get emotional when I do them. Because if you are interested in becoming a foster parent, when we took in our host son, I didn't think it was going to be easy. I really didn't know what to expect. But 3 years on, I can confidently say it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm going to blow my own horn or toot my own horn a little bit and say, I've done a lot of good things in my life. You know, I don't have to be shy in sharing that. I feel like I'm a good person. I've done good things. I really am passionate about contributing to whichever cause I think I can contribute to. But he's by far, hands down, the best thing that I've ever done in my life. And then when I tell people sometimes say, oh, you're so amazing, your family, you all are so kind, it's such a nice thing that you're doing. And it almost makes me embarrassed and ashamed because I'm like, no, see, that's not what's happening here. Like what we're doing is we're building a family. And it's not like, oh, you guys are such great people bringing in this poor, you know, lost soul who had no family into your home. And it's, you know, people who develop these types of relationships know that like, the love there that's mutual, I mean, he saved my life as much as I, quote unquote, helped him out. So he came, and he had very little English skills. And it felt like when you come to America, people are like, welcome to America, shake your hand, good luck. It is very, very, very overwhelming for them. If we think about how overwhelming it would be for us to invite a stranger into our home, imagine leaving your home, leaving your family, even if you're running away from a war, living in a refugee camp and wallowing there for years, not being able, it literally being illegal to try to find access to work or education while you're in a refugee camp and just waiting and not knowing anything about your future. It's torture. It's torture. And then coming here and thinking that, okay, I've made it. I'm in America. I'm going to have all these opportunities for success, but it's really, really, really hard at the beginning. To get your state ID, you need a social security number. But to get your social security number, you need a state ID. So what do you do then? You know, you need all this paperwork to get certain things to get health insurance. But to get health insurance, you need all the paperwork. So it's really, in the beginning, it takes a lot of time and patience to get that ball rolling in terms of, well, what are you going to do every day? How are you going to get your education? What about a GED? What about high school? What about health insurance? What about a job, all of this stuff, and then not knowing the language, not knowing anything else, going outside and seeing nobody like you. It's terrifying. But you take it day by day and little by little. And I remember when people would say, like, how did you make that work? And I said, maybe we can have bad assumptions about everyone, the way that our president in the beginning, I don't even know if this was when he was campaigning, was talking about Mexicans and how they're all rapists and criminals, and we just got to close our borders and close our doors. And I said, if my family is a microcosm of that, I can either close my doors or I can open them. And when you open your doors, the possibilities of growing as a person, as a family, it's amazing. And as I have reflected on being both a biological mother and a foster mother, and thinking about how different they are and how they just activate different parts of my heart, and how for a very, very long time I would tell people that I feel like I love my foster children more than I love my biological children. And in a way, it was also about when I throw a birthday party for my foster children, it's something that I know they haven't had access to in the way that we get to celebrate them. When I throw a birthday party for my first grader, he's just like, Mom, what are you going to do for my birthday? My birthday's coming up. Like, he expects it. He is entitled to it. You know, he wants to go to Zap Zone or go bowling because all the kids in his class did that. But when I throw a party for my foster kids, it's not as if they've had somebody doting on them and throwing them surprise birthday parties in the past. It's not all rosy. It is not all rosy. One thing that we have to keep in mind is that the children who are bringing into our home, the children or the young adults, they're coming from places of trauma. And I think that being trauma-informed is extremely valuable, not only in the way that you interact with them, but how you interact with yourself. Many of them are very, very reserved and it's very, very difficult for them to be able to openly express what they're feeling. So one of the things I have struggled with a lot in being a foster parent is, do my foster kids love me? And I know that sounds weird. And I feel like when I would read mommy blogs and read things about like moms, even with their own biological children, feeling sad when their children don't need them as much anymore because this relationship is built on so much need, and it hurts when your children kind of pull away and don't need you so much anymore. I felt a lot of that as a foster parent because I know my foster kids need me and I know I do a lot for them, but they don't always express gratitude. And gratitude's not the right word because, you know, you don't become a foster parent to get gratitude from your foster children. You become a foster parent because it's a calling from your heart and it's a desire to do something for more than just your biological family or for somebody who really needs it. But it is something that I grapple with in that I know my kids love me, but it's not something that they're going to come out and easily say. So when you're looking for that like gratification that it gives you or the satisfaction, it's in little things, like getting a heart emoji text message is a really big deal because they may not be able to fully enunciate, like, I appreciate X, Y, and Z, but they can send me a heart emoji. So after I brought an older brother, younger sister's foster placement didn't work out, and she ended up going to 3 different foster placements before she was like, can you guys please take me? And that's when we had really started our licensing process to become actually licensed foster parents instead of host parents. So that's when we started going through all of the paperwork and the extra trainings and the pride trainings and whatnot. None of it is fantastic or exciting, but you know, at the pride trainings you do get to meet other potential foster parents, and it's an opportunity for you to build networks. So the first thing about it being difficult is that your foster children will not always be able to say how much they appreciate you. And sometimes it's hard because you're like, you're working so hard and you're not really getting anything. Sometimes it's zero communication. Sometimes it's no validation. And sometimes it's rebellion. You know, like, hey, I'm doing all this for you and you're still going to rebel against me, or you're not going to listen to me, or you're going to, you know, do what I told you not to do, or it's parenting. You know, it's parenting. The same way that your kids are going to rebel against you and disappoint you and say no to you and have this attitude with you, your foster kids may very well have that same thing. And one of the beautiful things that my caseworker reminded me of when I was like, oh my gosh. So when we got younger sister, you know, and she was in the throes of teenagerhood. And it was really, 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 really hard. I love her to death, but she was not as easy as her brother. And she was a teenage girl, and she was going through high school stuff. Her brother didn't do high school here, so he didn't have to walk into a building every day and try as hard as he could to fit in and be cool and, you know, do all of the things that high schoolers have to do to be a part of their high school society. So yeah, we would go through a couple of like, oh, well, I don't want you going there with that person. And it would be like, well, I'm going to go anyways. You know, I'm going to lie to you and I'm going to walk out the door and I'm going to go anyways. Or I don't want you wearing that. Well, I'm going to wear it anyways because you can't control what I do. You know, parenting stuff. So, as I would say, I think to any parent, find a support group and a support network. You need it. You really, really, really need it, just so you know that you're not the only person that's going through this. And it can be very hard of like, I'm doing so much, I'm working so hard, I'm sacrificing so much to like make everything work for you guys. And you're being really rude back to me. And that's not something that you're going to be able to say to them. Hopefully. Right? There's definitely rules need to be in place, right? There's rules, there's consequences, there's all of that stuff. But you do it, with my foster kids, I'm 10 times more gentle and aware of knowing that they haven't had the upbringing that your biological kids have had, or the families that are around you who have biological kids, they haven't had that upbringing. So in everything, be aware of that and be gentle. But on top of that, be gentle to yourself. Be gentle to yourself. Find somebody to vent to. Find a foster parent support group, which I go to. I have a tough time going to the ones through Samaritas because they tend to change locations. But if you look for the ones in Ann Arbor, they have them here too, sometimes through different agencies, but different agencies are very welcoming because foster parents know the challenges that other foster parents go through, and they're willing to, you know, just wrap you up and say, it's hard, and it's great, and it's awesome, and you're going to be okay. So they won't be able to say thank you, but they thank you. They won't be able to say I love you, but they probably really, really love you and appreciate the things that you're doing. I am so grateful that my two biological little kids have these two amazing older brother and sister to look up to play with. If you ask my 2-year-old who he loves the most, his number 1 and 2 are my foster daughter and my foster son. Before he says mom, before he says dad, before he says his grandparents, his aunts and uncles, his cousins, anyone, his 1 and 2 are his foster brother and his foster sister. So you gotta take a chance on something in your life. And if this is the chance that you're going to take, no, it's not going to be easy. When people are like, isn't it hard? And I look at them and I say, isn't parenting hard? Yeah, parenting is really hard. And having 1 child or 2 children or 3 children, it's hard. I would be lying to you if I didn't say it was, but anyone who's done that knows that anything worth having in life is hard. That's the end of that. And to know that you have built in your home bonds of love that aren't just by blood. I think that's the most beautiful thing that we can do in life. That yes, I can love my children. I can love my biological kids, but you know, every creation, human and non-human, loves their biological children. You know, I think it's a gift. It's a real gift to say that I can love somebody who's not my biological child. I can treat them like my child, and I can care for them and love them. And it's beautiful, and it's worth it. So that's what I've got to say. I don't know what my time is, but I'm open to questions or whatever Kayla wants to do.
Hello, hello. So we can both now take any questions, or try to take any questions that you guys might have. That's okay, don't be shy. Yes. So I don't know about what relations we might have with that organization. We're still growing in the Washtenaw community, so I'm glad to know that that is there. We might. I don't know about it. But our youth up to the age of 21, we're providing services to, so then I guess they would be maybe able to benefit from that help from 22 to 25. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And then mentoring, yes, we do look for mentors. The mentors are really determined by where the foster youth are. So there might be a situation where you might be a mentor and you're in a community where we just don't have a big need of mentors, but we might someday. So we do ask people to, who are interested and like to consider mentoring. Yeah, that's an okay thing to do. We have some flyers and information on your way out the door. That's on the little podium thing, and if you can take one of those flyers and contact the contact information at the bottom, and that will go to me, and then I can direct you to our mentor tutor coordinator.
I am very familiar with Our House. I'm actually a mentor with Our House. Yep. And it's a fantastic organization. And the awesome thing about mentoring is that if you're not in a position to be a foster parent or a host parent, be a mentor. Because when I think about my relationship that I have with my mentee through Our House, who is a youth that's aged out of foster care, we get together, we have lunch, we'd work on budgeting skills together. And when I think about and my youth and my mentee in Our House is almost the same age as my foster daughter. But when I tell my foster daughter something about budgeting, she does what a teenager would do to their parent when their parent gets upset with them for spending too much money. She huffs and puffs and she stomps out of the room because she's my kid. I wanted to say, my caseworker said, when they act like that with you, you should take it as a compliment because it shows that they're truly comfortable in your home in a way that they probably haven't been in many other places where they've had to grow up and act not their age and be totally responsible. And now they can kind of take a breath and be, the irresponsible teenager that they probably should have been able to have been earlier. But I can get through to my mentee because a mentoring relationship is very different than a parental relationship, and you get a lot out of mentors. So mentoring is awesome. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about the differences in terms of expectations for hosts versus foster families?
So the foster families will go through the whole licensing process. That takes about 3 months. Host families go through about a 6-month process. And then both of them will work with the youth for a number of years. The foster home for 2+ years, maybe 3, 4, 5, even more. The host family, we tell host families to commit to about 1 to 2 years. And it's very unofficial. Sometimes the youth moves into the host family and they don't really want a relationship. They want to rent a room. Sometimes the youth moves into the host family and they want a relationship. So you will have the opportunity to meet the youth who is looking for a host home. You'll get to talk to each other and figure out, if you guys get along, if this would be a good fit. And you also get to basically determine what that relationship is going to be. So you can talk to them to decide, ask, what do you want help with? What do you want we can cook dinner together every night, or you can just do your own thing. Here's curfew. How should we arrange this? Do you want to text me if you're not going to be here by a certain time? Don't slam the door at 3 a.m. when you're walking through the door. What rules do we need to put into place? You come up with that together, and then you kind of see, what is it that this youth wants from the relationship? So my parents have actually been host parents as well, and both of the kids have fallen in kind of an in-between. They have not necessarily embraced my parents as their parents, but they also haven't just been a distant rentee either. They've been able to get to know my mom as a friend, and continue to visit the home on Sundays for family dinners and things like that. So the host home, it's hard to express the expectations because it really is different every single home. The host homes, one difference is that, and I'm always speaking professionally, and then Mariam will probably share, you always say stuff so much better than I do. But one difference between the host home and the foster home is that with foster homes, the need is now. There are youth who are waiting for foster homes, and they are stuck in these situations. And so the need for foster homes is constant. Someone will open as a foster home. We will probably have a youth ready to go to their home by the time they actually get their license. We may have a youth, often we'll have a youth aware of a youth that is in need of that home. The host homes are different. The host homes are needed on a case-by-case basis. And so a home might open up as a host home, and we don't know if a youth is going to need that home within a year, within a few days. It really depends on when we're going to have a youth in that area ready to transition into that new step of that new living step. And so I've approved homes as host homes in areas where I've said, I just don't think we're going to have a need for a host home here for a year or so. I just don't know of any youth who are in a place in your location right now. And then had to call them up the very next day to say, oh, wait, I take it all back. We need a host home. Never mind. So it's really, really hard also to gauge when a host home is going to be needed. So that's another difference. And then I don't know if you...
From my experience of being first a host parent and then a foster parent, the fun thing about being a host home is that it's basically as much as you do what you want to do, and there are no legal obligations, right? My host son was never I was never his guardian, so it really, like Kayla said, it's based on what our desires are for the relationship. Do you want to be do you want me to be your landlord? Do you want me to be your friend? Or do you want me to be your family? And how do we navigate that relationship? With the foster child, there is definitely the legal responsibilities that come with being a foster child. For my son, who was my host son, if he needed to go to the doctor, I didn't have any obligation to go with him. I almost always did because I wanted to and he wanted me to, and I just thought it would make him feel a little less scared, a little more comfortable, whatever it may be. But with my foster daughter, that's my obligation as a foster parent to make sure that her medical and dental and healthcare needs are being taken care of. So I saw it more along the lines of obligation versus non-obligation, but both of them, I ended up doing a lot of the same things. Just one as a host parent was I don't have to do this, there's no obligation. And it actually made it feel a little bit more easy because since there was no obligation involved, everything that I was doing was because I wanted to.
Yes. The window in the basement. Come to the orientation on Monday. We will be going into detail and all that. We do have an orientation schedule in the back, by the way.
It's called an egress window, right?
Huh? An egress window. Here's my orientation plug.
Something you have to be able to, there has to be an exit. Or they say that if there's no exit from your basement, you shouldn't use it as livable space. So you know, you can have stuff down there, but you can't be like, oh yeah, we use this space to like live here.
Mostly storage and laundry. And so if a family does have that room, the basement developed, they may have to move everything up stairs or install the window. And once again, we've had families do GoFundMes to get that done. And the requirements, I've asked the licensing workers, they basically say, I will ask the family to demonstrate how they can exit the basement outside. So if you have a window and you're like, they can get out that window, and the licensing worker's like, show me, and you're like, it probably doesn't pass. And so that's the same with all foster care. That's just us following the state guidelines, which makes it unfortunately very difficult to find enough foster homes. It can be finished, it can be carpeted if it's used.
Your licensing worker will work with you on it. I never had to climb out my basement window, you know.
They lied to me.
But you know, like my home, I live in a newer home, so there is a window that has a little ladder out of it, and it looks like it's usable. It doesn't look like it's all rusted over, and you know, there's no like chain thing on top of it. So they let it go. I guess we don't have livable space down there. It's an unfinished basement, so maybe that's why they never asked me to climb out of it. But yeah. Fire exits and basement windows.
It is, unfortunately. It is such a small thing, but it is often the biggest barrier to us getting the homes that we need. So it is something to think about, but
The other thing you could
scheduling as well. Sorry, I was rushing through those last slides. Scheduling as well. So what that means is considering the barriers, is considering scheduling. Consider the schedule of taking another youth into your home. So some families will start this process and then decide that they just don't have the time for that. You are welcoming someone into your home as a child. And so that means that there are going to be doctor's appointments. That means there are going to be dentist appointments. For our youth coming here from overseas, many of them have never seen a dentist. Many of them have not gone to a doctor. And so you're also going to taking them to the mall. You are going to the soccer games that I keep mentioning. And so we do ask families to consider the time of taking someone in. That being said, most of our families, if they have two parents or one parent, either way, the parents in that household are all full-time workers. Some of them are incredibly active in the community. Some of them are very, very busy. So it really kind of depends on you. So some families say, can I do this if I have a job? If my husband has a job, if my wife has a job, if we're both working, is this possible? Yes, absolutely. And so that is definitely manageable, but it's something to take into consideration as well. Foster care, you should consider it seriously because it is a big investment. And if there was anything else anyone noticed on the slide that I didn't go into in detail due to time, yes.
You talked about some of the support services provided, and I just wonder, since this program is newer to Washington, are those folks coming from all over the state?
The staff?
Like the therapy?
Yes. Yep. So our office is based out of Lansing, but the staff come to you. And they'll often be in your home, and I will laugh with foster parents and talk about how their families are growing bigger because now all our staff are there. So the staff do come to the home. If we have a bunch of youth, maybe they're ready for an independent living class, then they will maybe host a class here in this area with all of the youth together. Were there very many times that you've had to drive to Lansing?
I think I've driven to Lansing once. Yeah, it is not often. Our caseworkers come to us when there's events that our foster daughter would have to go to in Lansing or somewhere else where they were having like a group therapy session or something like that. They would make travel arrangements for her. So I think I drove her to a group therapy session once, and that was because we happened to be going out to that part of town anyway, and I've driven to Lansing once.
And support also, a family will receive a stipend because they are a state licensed foster home, and so they will receive a stipend to help with the daily care of the youth. And regarding Lansing, if you do drive to Lansing, it will probably be for, say, our Christmas party, or we're going to start doing soccer tournaments twice a year. Keep mentioning it's what they like.
Yes.
So we did a soccer tournament this fall and everyone loved it. So we said we need to do these more often. So we're going to start doing them, and I'm looking at one in Washtenaw in the spring potentially, and then one in Enum in the fall. So if any of you know soccer fields that are just like great places, we're looking for one because we'd like to have a soccer tournament for all of the youth, and we get them different colored shirts, and then the families come and we have a potluck. So hopefully it'll be a lot of fun. Does that answer? There's also support groups, and you had mentioned our support groups moving, and I apologize. We are trying to transition our support group from being staff-led to being foster parent-led, and that's been a little rocky, but we want to see that get going so that all of the parents can sit in a circle, or however you guys all sit, without any staff there, so you can get into the really the things you don't want to say with us.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So there are the support groups, and that also has a Facebook page, so you can go on the Facebook page, and I think we're getting the staff off of that too. Not to say that there needs to be, we don't know, because people haven't expressed it, but we just figured it might be helpful for people if we're not present with that. And so yes, there are supports. There are more supports than I'm remembering to mention as well. Does that answer your question? Washtenaw County, right now, I'm not entirely sure. We have 155 youth we served last year, and most of our youth are in Lansing and Washtenaw, so I would say probably a higher number. And some of them are in Detroit as well. But I'm sorry that I can't say for sure. And not all of those youth are in foster homes. Some of those youth are living independently on their own as well. So we have more youth in our program than we actually have foster homes, because a number of those youth are now living on their own, but they're still younger than 21, so they're still technically receiving our services. And they're still connected to the foster parents and maybe the host parents as well, though they're not living with them. So, yeah. Yes? To attend one and audit it, you would have to check with the new foster parent group leader. But generally, the practice is that that's okay. I've heard other foster care support groups welcome people in.
If it's a closed group, they'll make it clear that it's a closed group. Otherwise, there's an agency in Washtenaw County called Fostering Futures, and their office is very close to my home. So I would go to their support group. It was like bi-weekly on Wednesday evenings. And I wasn't a part of that agency, and they still were very, very welcoming. And they always had potential foster parents in the group, so they could get an idea for what are the things that real foster parents are struggling with. And it was fantastic. It was just another way to even grow my community to being outside of Samaritas as well. Fostering Futures. Mm-hmm. Yeah, their office, it's on like Washtenaw and Huron Parkway, on that intersection.
Any other questions?
Just one. The support that you offer to foster children, do those extend to the ones who are aging out and
Yes. Yep. Just as many staff go to the home as well, just about. Correct? Has that been your experience?
In my experience, my foster youth have generally rejected therapy services once they turn 18. Yeah, but there are those services available.
There are different, I don't know what, I don't know the ins and outs of what
Yeah.
services you
Right.
The services are the same up to the age of 21. Yep.
So, but you said they might be up to 25 in host families?
Up to 21. In host families, our services last after 21. It's in our house that they can serve them up to 25. But our services only last to 21. So they'll receive the same services. Just once they hit about 18, we'll start kind of preparing them more for independent living. And that's when they might be transitioning into a host home. And sometimes a foster home becomes a host home if the youth wants to stay there. So then that relationship changes. But they still are a part of the family. So, but I did just realize that we are at 8:30. So I do want to thank you guys for coming and checking this out and learning about refugee foster care. I know that this is new to a lot of people, and it's quite a lot to think about. If you are interested, again, we are having our orientation to go more into the details about what it looks like to become a foster home this Monday. And we will continue to have those every other month here in Ann Arbor. And then please feel free to come up and ask any questions as well. But with that, due to time, I think we are going to close. So thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Please eat food as you exit. There's a bunch of food on the table out there. Please eat it.